Greetings and welcome to the pod. My name is Mark West, and this month we're talking shark nets. Shark nets are fairly common across popular Australian beaches, but beyond giving swimmers a perception that they are being protected from sharks, do they actually work? Jordan Sosnowski is the Advocacy Director for Action for Dolphins, a group that aims to stop cruelty to dolphins and other similar animals, and has recently done a lot of research into shark nets. The first question I asked Jordan was, what are shark nets?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Before we started our campaign a few years ago, I actually didn't know. I kind of had this idea of what they were, and in my mind, they were sort of exclusion barriers. You know, they were a net, like a sort of sea pen that kept the people in and the sharks out. And that sounds like a really kind of good idea. But then when I looked into them, they're not that at all. They're basically these nets that sit parallel to the beach. So they're usually about 150 metres long, and they're anchored to the sea floor. But the problem is you know, as we know, in Australia, we're really lucky. We have incredibly long beaches. 150 metres of netting doesn't really do very much. So the nets don't really work to kind of protect people from sharks, because the sharks can swim around the nets, or actually under the nets, or even over the nets. So they sort of don't do what most people think they do.
So they're not very deep, really, are they? They're only a couple of metres.
They're not very deep, and there's been some, you know, incredible photographs that have been taken actually of sharks on the, you know, other side of the nets, you know, on the inside of the nets where people are actually swimming and surfing. So the science definitely shows that they sort of don't work to keep sharks out. So they're really kind of just this political tool, I guess, that MPs use to try and convince people, oh, look, you know, we're putting in this thing and you're safe from sharks, but they don't really work at all. And the unfortunate thing is as well that not only do they not work to protect people, but they also kill a lot of marine animals. So some sharks do get caught up in them, but a lot of other marine animals do as well, like dolphins and turtles and endangered rays and lots of other marine animals. So they're really terrible for the environment.
Yeah, so what really do they... I guess they make you feel more comfortable as a swimmer. You can swim over the top of them and see them, but then you're swimming over the top of them, if you can. A shark probably can too. Are they just to make you feel better and then a political tool?
I think so. I mean, they were developed about, you know, a long time ago, and I think at the time they sort of thought, well, they're kind of big fishing nets. So the idea is, you know, they're a lethal technology. So the idea is to kill sharks. And so I guess that does, you know, if you are scared of sharks, that does make you feel a little bit better. But the recent trials that they've done in northern New South Wales show that actually, you know, in the time that they were in, more dolphins got caught in those nets than sharks did. So they're not kind of even working to catch the sharks that they're intended to. So, yeah, I think they are a political tool, and I think a lot of people don't maybe understand exactly what they do. They probably think that they are a kind of exclusion barrier that completely protects them from sharks. But, the great thing is that once you actually get chatting to people and explain what it is that they actually are and how they work or don't work, as the case may be, they kind of start to think really differently about them. So education is really key.
I read somewhere they kill up to 300 big animals a year, and presumably heaps more as well. There are a lot of rare species get caught up, aren't there?
Yeah, well, you know, there's a lot of endangered and vulnerable shark species that get caught up in there, but also turtle species that are vulnerable and rays, and obviously dolphins as well. So there's a, you know, devastating loss of, you know, really innocent marine life that aren't meant to be kind of targeted by the nets at all, that are getting caught up. And I think that's why, luckily, kind of community perception about the nets is changing. I mean, in Ballina, where they had the trials most recently, people kind of wanted the nets in. There were a few shark attacks there, and they said, yep, we want the nets in. That's what the community said. And then after the trials, community support went way down for them because of the huge number of bycatch, because they weren't sort of, the community wasn't prepared to accept the number of animals killed for the very, small amount of protection, if any, that the nets were providing. And, the reality is, like, you're far more likely to be killed from sort of falling off a ladder in Australia than, being struck by lightning than ever being killed by a shark. It's sort of like the odds of dying from a shark attack are like 1 in 3,700,000. So it's really, really slim chances.
Yeah, you compare it to the odds of drowning or something like that, and they're not even comparable, are they?
No. So, this fear that people have is kind of completely irrational, and I think a lot of it stems from pop culture. These references to Jaws in the 80s, that movie has kind of just really stuck in our heads, and we have this real fear of being attacked by a shark. But yeah, it is completely irrational. I think even the maker of Jaws and the guy that wrote the book has now dedicated his life to shark conservation because
Yes.
he realised oh my gosh, it's such a terrible legacy that movie has left in people's minds.
Yeah, there's a new film out actually, I think called Meg or something, with Jason Statham, and it's got some extraordinary large shark hunting humans in it, which is really going to help, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
That's also interesting. Like, sharks don't, as far as I understand it, don't really go out of their way to hunt humans. If you happen to be swimming near a hungry one, then perhaps that's not great. But they're not hunting humans, are they?
No, and that's a complete, misnomer that sharks get, the taste for human flesh or something like that. I think sometimes people have this idea that, if one shark's around and it attacks somebody, then it's going to actually stay in that area to try and find other humans. But the research shows that actually, sharks are migratory. A lot of them swim incredibly long distances, and they don't hang around. Ones in Ballina that they've tagged and monitored have shown a couple of them have actually swum all the way to New Zealand. So they don't, sort of hang around that in a particular area and after a shark attack and then look for more humans to bite or anything like that. We're not part of their food chain. So usually they don't specifically target humans to eat.
Was it in one of the latter Jaws films that the original shark's family hunted down the original human's family, Richard Dreyfuss's family or something?
Yes, I have to admit that I haven't seen them, but I have heard that's what happened. And yeah, that's completely crazy. So I think that, they are very intelligent animals, but I think maybe that might be giving them a little bit more foresight than is warranted, yeah.
And so what are some of the non-lethal ways? Because I guess it's still understandable people would like to have a feeling that they're comfortable at the beach. And what are some of the non-lethal ways that you could avoid being attacked by a shark? Or what are some of the measures that are being taken these days?
There's lots of non-lethal methods available. A couple of the ones that are being trialled in South Africa, because obviously in Cape Town they have they had a bit of a problem with great white sharks there, and they developed this really amazing shark spotters program where it's kind of as the name suggests. Basically, there's somebody up on a high vantage point like a mountain or something, and they've been trained to kind of spot sharks. So they're there with amazing sunglasses and binoculars, and you look in the water and see if they can spot one. Then there's a person on the beach that they're coordinating with, and as soon as a shark's spotted, they walkie-talkie each other, and usually then an aerial drone is sounded, so an alarm goes off and then people get out of the water. So those kind of spotters programs work really well, and there's been one that's trialled in Byron Bay in New South Wales, which has also been really effective. Aerial patrols, so helicopters, drones. You can also get personal deterrent devices, which are really interesting. They're a kind of new technology that emit electrical pulses into the water, which kind of interfere with the shark's sensory organs and stop them from coming to bite you if they are near you. So they've actually used them in Western Australia, which and so far they've been really effective. Like the government's actually providing a subsidy to people if they want to buy them.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So Western Australia has an interesting history with sharks. I mean, they had the drumlines and sort of active culling of sharks a couple of years ago. So they've done a 180 degrees there, have they?
As far as I understand, the drum lines are still being used in Western Australia, but they are investing in those kind of alternative technologies. So the subsidy that they're providing on the electronic device, I think it's called like a Shark Smart deterrent, and basically surfers, it's kind of like an ankle thing that they wear and it trails along the water behind them. So I think they're normally around $700, but the government's providing a kind of subsidy if you buy them, which is a really great incentive for people to try that if they are worried about the shark attacks. So, so it'd be great if New South Wales and some of the other states in Australia would invest in those non-lethal methods as well. But, I mean, a lot of it's about community education as well, not swimming at dusk and not swimming when there's bait fish around. And there's Shark Smart apps that you can download that tell you, when is a good time to actually go swimming, and only swim between the flags and all of that sort of thing. So a lot of it's about education.
What's a smart drum line? Like what makes... So a drum line's a big net with hooks on it, isn't it? And how does it work?
So the smart drum lines kind of differ. Basically, they were created as a non-lethal approach. So the smart drum line has an anchor on it. It does still have a hook with a fish on it, and when the shark or any other animal gets caught on it, it sends out an alert to a response person that's waiting for them, usually someone from the Department of Primary Industry, so a government person, and they then come out to check the nets to see what's on the other end of it. If it is a shark, they then carefully take it off the hook, tow it away from the area that it's been caught. They tag it, and in a way they are, definitely a better alternative to traditional nets because they are meant to be non-lethal. But they do still have a kind of detrimental effect on marine life because obviously other marine animals can get caught on that net. And the jury's a little bit out on the post-release survival rate. So you can imagine if you tow an animal for a few kilometres and then tag them, it's quite a stressful experience. So I think they found with hammerheads, they're really at a high risk of dying after that process. But in a way, they definitely are better than traditional nets because you can get some information from the tagging. So, that statistic that I said before about that particular shark, swimming to New Zealand, they got that from being able to tag a shark and work out where it actually goes. And so in some ways it feeds into that education that sharks don't hang around the area, they do migrate, and it'll be interesting to see if they actually come back to that same area in Ballina next year. That they are smart in that they, give us information, but they're not completely non-lethal in the sense that, they are still a hook, and they do attract other marine animals to bite that hook, and sometimes the alert person doesn't get there in time and the shark or other marine animal ends up dying at the end of the hook rather than being able to be tagged.
Yeah, I imagine if they're caught in the middle of the night, I don't know whether the authorities have boats ready to go. Do they? I mean, that's...
Well, one good thing about them is that they're brought in, so they're sort of deployed, and then I understand, as far as I understand, I think at night they're not there. So there is a person that's meant to be there during the day, but there definitely have been cases where animals have been caught at the end of the lines, even in the normal traditional mesh nets. And I know that animal welfare organisations have called the authorities to say, quick, come, like a dolphin or a ray is caught in the net and we need you to come and take it out because there's a huge fine for anybody other than a government person to interfere with the nets, and they haven't gotten there in time and the animals drowned. So, yeah, there's definitely drawbacks.
I didn't realise they were baited. So there are hooks, but there's bait on them. That could attract animals to the area, couldn't it?
Yeah, definitely there has been some criticism about that, of saying, that's a way to actually get sharks to come in to those areas rather than coming out. But then, on the other side of it, I have spoken to some people from the DPI and they've said, look, it's no worse than a fisherman sitting in a boat and putting, a fishing line over the other end of it. But I think in terms of, like, because they are such a new technology, there's still a long way to go in terms of like, looking at whether or not that actually is the case. And if it is the case that they're attracting sharks, then obviously they're not that smart after all. Yeah, I mean, well, even since the shark nets were just introduced in New South Wales alone, more than 15,000 marine animals have been killed. And these are animals that are vulnerable and threatened and, some of them very close to extinction. So it's really, really terrible for our ocean environments. And the thing is, sharks, whatever you might think of them, and many people do think that they're scary, they're apex predators. That we need to learn to live with them. They're like so essential to healthy oceans, because they found that in many cases when there's been a huge shark cull, it has these like ongoing effects for other marine animals down the rest of the food chain. So you can't just kind of take out one animal and expect to have healthy oceans. It's just not how it's done. So there really needs to be much more education and a real investment by our governments in the non-lethal technologies, because that's the only way that we're going to, feel really safe, I think, in the water again, to have using modern technology to actually protect us from these animals. But we also have to realise that at the end of the day, we're going into their environment. This is their home as well. So we need to kind of be smart about how we do that and think about, okay, is this a good time for me to actually go swimming, and am I between the flags, and is it dusk? Okay, maybe I shouldn't actually go in the water. So I think education is really key.
You made an interesting point that I think they cancelled these, or they stopped these Northern New South Wales trials because of the fear that whales would get caught in the nets. So I guess whales have this public profile, don't they? Everybody is save the whales because, for whatever reason, there's been good advocacy in the past, but some of these other species getting caught up, endangered species, don't quite have that. So you're right. I guess there's a lot of education to go here.
And it's a bizarre thing because people, used to be really scared of whales. The whole kind of Moby Dick thing, and whales were never that popular kind of in the 60s. Like, we used to hunt them in Australia up until not that long ago. So they had a really bad public profile as well. And it was only when environmentalists really started to get out there with the message that whales are really key to our ocean environments, and they're amazing animals and we should be protecting them, that slowly over the last kind of 30, 40 years, the community's perception of whales has really changed. And now we wouldn't ever dream of killing one. It's kind of like this Australian icon. So hopefully, in 30, 40 years, maybe the shark will be the same. You never know.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of worked. It's worked for whale populations, hasn't it? Like, whale populations are doing okay at some species. I think there are some that are still not so great, but they've kind of recovered a bit, haven't they?
Yeah, well, since the ban on whaling came into place in the 80s, the populations have definitely recovered. But I guess the problem with that is there are some countries like Iceland and Norway and Japan in particular that are now using that as an excuse to, let's bring back commercial whaling, because the populations have clearly recovered. So now's the time to go and start hunting them again. So it's, good and bad. Like, obviously really great that the populations are improving, but it's not good in terms of like what that information is being used to then try and justify. I think especially when it comes to animal welfare, I think that people have a really kind of conflicted relationship with animals, especially in Australia. We have like one of the highest rates of pet ownership here, but yet, we're huge meat eaters. So, and, we're so adamant about protecting whales and dolphins, yet, happy to kill millions and millions of farm animals every year just to eat. So it's kind of this really conflicted relationship that we have with different animals and the way that we see them. And I think sharks are really one of those. I think a lot of people think, they're okay to be killed, but oh my gosh, like, you can't kill a dolphin or a turtle. That's terrible. So it's strange.
Australia's got a very high level of like extinctions and reducing diversity and biodiversity in that as well, haven't we? Like, when we're not on the world stage, not doing that great in our conservation.
No, definitely not. And I mean, when you think about the reason why these shark nets are, being trialled in northern New South Wales in the first place, like normally they would actually be considered a threatening process. You know, we have actually really strong laws federally for the environment. And if you wanted to put a shark net in at a state level, normally you'd have to go, jump through all of these kind of permit approvals. And the New South Wales state government basically just applied and said, you know what, we want to be exempted from this federal environment law. We want to just put the shark nets in straight away. And our environment minister went, yep, okay, and just gave them this complete exemption from our normal federal environmental law to be able to put these nets in. So it's such a shame when you think like, oh, we've actually got really strong laws here, but then we've got all of these other mechanisms where people and governments and industries can get around them. So yeah, it's really frustrating.
Isn't that fascinating? Like, I guess that shows the place that it shows what people think of sharks. I guess when you come down to it, the fear.
Yeah. The fear and I guess the political consequences of not doing anything. And I think, in Ballina especially and probably in New South Wales, they thought, you know what, we want to be seen to be taking action. And here's a way that we can quickly show that we've acted in response to these shark fatalities and to quell community concern. And then, a year and a half later, they say, oh, we're going to be guided by the science on the trials. And they look at the science and they definitely don't work. And, they knew that before they even put them in. Like the chief scientist in New South Wales said, the shark nets don't work. Like we knew that before they even did the trials. So, it's incredibly disappointing that the government doesn't even listen to their own scientists on this issue.
Yeah, isn't it? I guess it's that the risk might be so low, but the consequences are high and graphic, aren't they? I guess it's really kind of it gets to you. I guess it's a real feeling.
It's a real visceral thing. I mean, when you see that's pictures of shark attacks, and I think it is definitely really scary. And as unfortunately, the places where these incidents normally happen are at tourist spots. And obviously the community has been concerned about people not visiting because they might be scared of, a potential shark attack. And I think that is what happened around the Northern Rivers in Ballina because it is such a holiday tourist spot. And the local council thought, oh, we're really going to be devastated by this if we don't kind of have something in for all the Sydney people that are coming up to visit. And a lot of the people that I spoke to actually in Ballina said, look, we know that they don't work, but they work in terms of public perception, so we're happy with that. And that was just like so surprising to me. I just couldn't believe that, they'd accepted the fact that they didn't actually work to protect anyone, but they, in their minds, they actually worked because of I guess that, they're good advertising, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's it's complicated.
It is. It's a really complicated issue, yeah. And then, they start to get into, there's arguments about, favouring human life over animal life, which I think is kind of a bit of a false, argument to set up because if the shark nets did actually work, if they were exclusion barriers that happen to catch marine animals and bycatch, then I think that kind of this or that, humans or animals would apply, but they don't actually work to protect humans, and they do catch heaps of marine animals and don't actually catch sharks. So it's sort of, this thing of like if they did do their job properly, there would be an argument to be made for them, but they don't.
Yeah, they're just basically big fishing nets, which are, trawlers, which are kind of banned.
That's exactly, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, they're just, enormous fishing nets. And I do think that if people did realise that, even with the public perception thing of being able to, potentially help boost tourism, I think the majority of people would say actually, like, we'd prefer something that actually worked, like these non-lethal technologies.
Yep. And so, and you did this work as part of your work for Action for Dolphins, is that correct? What does Action for Dolphins do?
So we started off as a purely a sort of small cetacean, like dolphins and small dolphins and whales protection charity, and have broadened our work more recently to include all marine animals. And the main things that we focus on are the SharkNet campaign, and also really trying to educate people about dolphin captivity, because unfortunately that is still legal in Australia. And the other main thing that we campaign about is the dolphin hunting, which occurs in Japan. So people, probably heard of the whaling that happens in the Antarctic, but maybe it's not so common to have heard about the sort of coastal dolphin hunting that happens in Japan itself. So yeah, we're working to stop those hunts. So our main way that we do that is through the law. So we're kind of a little bit different to most animal protection organisations, is that in that, we do raise awareness and we do a lot of advocacy campaigns because education is really important, but we really believe in kind of using the existing law to try and change things for animals, and also bringing legal actions to push the law where we can. So, for example, like where that exemption was given to allow the shark nets, we're certainly looking into ways that we can challenge that.
Oh, wow. And to influence international law in Japan would be, very difficult, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so we've kind of realised that international law is first of all incredibly difficult to enforce. There is no international police, and international law really has no teeth. It's very, very hard to enforce. So the way that we're kind of challenging the dolphin hunts in Japan is through Japanese domestic law. So we've hired some Japanese lawyers and got a Japanese legal firm and actually trying to challenge it under Japanese animal welfare law, because there's much more evidence to suggest that when you bring a law in the actual country itself, it's much more likely to be enforced, and people can, governments will actually respect it, rather than with international law. It's all a voluntary system. Countries can kind of opt out if they want to, like with Japan. And the recent case against whaling, they basically said, we don't submit to your jurisdiction, or, we don't agree with that ruling, or, we just think of another scientific program and that might pass your test. So it's kind of, very, very easy to get around. So I always wanted to work in animal law, which is obviously a really niche area. There's not that many jobs in it, unfortunately, because animals can't really pay you. But it is starting to. It's a big area in the US. It's definitely a lot bigger than it is in Australia, but it is growing here, and they teach it at quite a few universities in Australia now, like the subject of animal law. So it's really interesting. Yeah, we're a pretty small organisation, so we've only got 2 full-time staff and then 5 part-time. So we are pretty small, but I feel like we do a lot with a little. It's kind of a unique strategy, because a lot of organisations, I guess, shy away from legal action because it is quite risky, and it can be expensive, and it can go for a really long time. So it is quite difficult sometimes to explain to supporters of yours why something is taking such a long time. But I guess the good thing is that when you do get a win, it's usually one that is really lasting and can be enforced, and changes a lot for animals. So yeah, we've been lucky in that all of the legal actions that we've brought, we've been successful in. So hopefully that continues.
Well, that's all the time we've got in this month's edition of The Pod. Thanks very much to Jordan Sosnowski from Action for Dolphins for talking us through all the various issues regarding shark nets. If you'd like any more information from today's episode, you can check the show notes at www.thepodpodcast.net. That's www.thepodpodcast.net. And from there you'll find links to Action for Dolphins and to various research about shark nets. Thanks for listening in. My name's Mark West. I'll catch you next time on The Pod.